Morning. This is a yellow love shirt for anyone who hasn't seen this. This is what UUs tend to wear as part of the Standing on the Side of Love campaign at public rallies. Anyone who volunteers to march with us in the Pride Parade in June, which you are invited to do, you'll see a lot of these. So in the 1950s, there was a famous ad campaign that ran in newspapers. And by famous, I mean well-known to UU marketers and virtually no one else has ever heard of it. UU famous. And the ad consisted of a headline with the provocative question, "Are you a Unitarian and you don't know it?" Then below was a list of questions that would answer whether indeed you were a Unitarian and didn't know it. And this campaign was supposedly very effective in directing people towards our churches and fellowships. And this ran during this so-called fellowship period when Unitarian membership was growing very rapidly, mostly in small lay-led congregations which were called fellowships. Then after the 1961 merger of the Unitarians and the Universalists, the ad became, "Are you a Unitarian Universalist and you don't know it?" And supposedly the ad completely stopped working. And the theory is people would get like 7 syllables into the name and just give up, completely exhausted. Unitarian, forget it. I want no part of that, whatever that is. So in the 90s, there was another variation of this called the Belief-O-Matic quiz on the site BeliefNet. This wasn't created by UUs, it was its own thing. But it was a series of questions that anyone could answer, and it would spit out the religion that was the best fit for you based on your answers. And so some people would get the surprising answer that they were 99% match for Una, who's it, what's it. And then they'd have to find out what on earth a Una, who's it, what's it was, and hopefully there was a church in their area. And in both of these cases, this journey of discovery ended at a church or a fellowship, because historically a person acquired a UU identity by joining a UU church, by becoming a member of a specific congregation. And the goal of an ad campaign or something like that, the goal of church outreach, was to bring people into churches to increase their membership. Increasing membership is the metric by which we judge whether we're growing as a movement, whether our congregations are healthy or sickly, whether we're gaining traction in the culture, whether we're doing this right. Now today, online quizzes are more likely to tell us whether we're more Katniss or Hermione, but there's still a belief that there's a large group of people out there who would consider themselves Unitarian Universalists if only they'd ever heard of us. And in fact, there's a belief that this coming millennial generation is maybe even unusually sympathetic to Unitarian Universalist values, that they're a natural fit for our congregations. And so there's a belief that but there's also a belief, contrary to that, that their journey is less likely to end in membership in a church. In the latest issue of UU World Magazine, Teresa Cooley writes, "Most religious denominations are losing members. Many very rapidly, mainline Protestants most of all. Unitarian Universalist congregations seem for a while to have bucked these trends. But our U.S. membership has slipped each year since 2008. 1/3 of adults under 30, members of the rising millennial generation, claim no religious affiliation, and only 2 out of 10 believe church-going is important." In 2012, Unitarian Universalist Association President Peter Morales, he wrote a vision paper called Congregations and Beyond, about how we need to pay attention to these trends. He said the reality of today's world is that not everyone who shares our core values will want to become a part of a traditional congregation. The fact that so many share our values is an enormous opportunity. It's not a problem. But the future relevance of our faith may well depend on whether we can create a religious movement beyond as well as within a parish. That's Peter Morales. So today I wanted to offer some reflections on the meaning of membership, what it means to belong to a UU church, what it might mean to belong to Unitarian Universalism outside of a church, what Unitarian Universalism as a movement might look like. In Tom Shade's words, what its transcendent identity might be. So, anytime I talk about the meaning of going to a UU church, or about being a member, or about what UU means in general, I always attach a disclaimer, and since this is one of those kinds of sermons, allow me to disclaim two things. Okay, the first is a reminder that here in UU land, we practice freedom of the pulpit and freedom of the pew. So freedom of the pulpit means that I am invited, nay, I am expected, to give my full, honest, considered opinion about whatever the subject is, regardless of what I think sacred cows might lie out in the audience. And freedom of the pew means you are all invited to tell me afterwards that I am completely out to lunch on this issue. Or you can think it to yourself, you can whisper it quietly to your partner, you can live tweet it if you're live tweeting the service, hashtag preaching fail, or whatever you want to do. I don't speak on behalf of you, I don't speak on behalf of official UU, whatever that might be. The second disclaimer, and this one is equally important, is that I firmly believe there is no wrong reason to go to church. People come to church for many, many different reasons. Churches are complex institutions. They fill a wide variety of needs. We come to be inspired, to sing, to do good work, to socialize, to educate our children, to become a better person, just to get out of the house. There's 100 different reasons why we might come to church. Those reasons change over time. Sometimes we feel it more, sometimes less. Maybe Sunday morning is the highlight of our week one year, and then the next year we kind of don't even remember why we come here, but it's just a habit. I mean, it cycles in our life, and that's all good. There's no wrong reason to be at UU on a Sunday morning. So whatever I might say today about what I think the meaning of UU is, I don't mean to imply to anyone that somehow you're doing it wrong if it doesn't apply to you. Okay, so disclaimers out of the way. Membership. The most concrete expression of belonging in Unitarian Universalism is to take on the rights and responsibilities of guiding and sustaining a particular congregation by joining that congregation, by becoming a member. Membership here at UUI confers a number of rights and responsibilities. Members can serve on the board of trustees and on the worship team. They can vote on issues like the budget, the share of the plate, the election of officers, the calling of a minister, one of the most important things we do. Members are asked to make a pledge of financial support. The church is larger than its membership, but it literally cannot exist or function without its membership. The membership is the foundation. As a side note, a UU church has to have 30 members in order to be admitted to the UUA. And how much we give to the UUA, or are asked to give, is based on the number of our members. And how many votes we can cast at the annual General Assembly is based on our numbers. So membership is kind of the base foundation for how the UU system works across the nation. Congregations like UUI are the visible face of UU in communities. They are where services are held, where youth are nurtured in our religious education programs, where UUs come together to share laughter and ideas, to find pastoral care, where children are dedicated and important life milestones are celebrated. Congregations are where the knitting happens, and the art shows and the coffee hour. It's where we have our most direct opportunity to live out our third principle of encouraging one another to spiritual growth and acceptance of one another. And for about 150,000 Unitarian Universalists, church life in an actual church building by physically going to a church is the focal point of their religious life. And membership is the primary means by which they express their commitment to that life and the means by which they support its continued existence. Now, if the numbers are to be believed, however, there are about twice that many UUs, people who identify as Unitarian Universalists, who are not currently members of any congregation. Many of these UUs still enjoy real-world meet-space fellowship with one another, but they do it through other aspects of UU culture. For example, maybe they get their UU fix by spending a week each year at one of the annual camps, like SUSI, if you've ever heard of that. I think Southeastern UU Summer Institute, MUSA, Midwestern UU Summer Institute. These are sort of independent communities that are volunteer-led, that gather together once a week and have a big UU blowout, and they worship, and they do workshops, and they sing songs, and they hang out, and they drink beer, and they just kind of do everything you do. And for many UUs, camp culture is how they maintain that vital connection to their UU faith. There are also all the hyphenated affiliate groups. There's UU Buddhists, there's CUPS, the community of UU pagans, UU Humanists, UU Christian Fellowship, UU Jewish Association. People may experience their UU-ness through participating in one of these more focused groups without ever explicitly joining a congregation or regularly attending a general service. And then outside of the physical realm, there's also membership in the Church of the Larger Fellowship, which is a virtual congregation that serves UUs all over the world, thousands of them. And there's like a million different email discussion lists, and there are Facebook groups that have sprung up all over the place. And these groups do important work in connecting UUs all over the country in a way that an individual congregation can't really do. Right now, for example, there's a Facebook group where young adults who were raised UU can talk about their experiences growing up within the faith, within the religion. And they can begin to share ideas about what that experience was like and what they want to bring from that into the larger religion. And I think that development may have a very big impact on the future of our faith. It's one to keep an eye on. Because as it stands, the majority of children raised UU will never set foot in a UU church as adults. Now, our youth may become excellent exemplars of our values. They may carry our vision out into the world in a way that we admire and respect and are grateful for, but statistically, for the most part, they do not grow up to join UU churches. So the way UU has grown, or at least has been kept stable, has not been by us raising up the next generation of UUs within our church, but by reaching out to UUs outside of our church. We are a religion of converts. And if that dynamic were to change, if our youth were to retain their sense of belonging and for the most part participate in UU churches throughout their life, it could be one of the most significant developments in the history of our young religion. It would certainly shake things up. So, given all these different ways of being UU, some with institutional support, some without, some with formal mechanisms of membership and many without, and given the expectation that this sort of non-traditional participation is the way of the future, what does it mean to belong to Unitarian Universalism as a movement if we don't necessarily belong to an individual church? How do we talk about that? And there's a story, which could be apocryphal, that when all of the Unitarian Universalists were down in Phoenix a couple of years ago protesting Sheriff Joe Arpaio and his tent prisons, we were all out there in force, making our presence felt and really protesting this. The UUA media people would go to the press and say, hey, would you like an interview or photo op with the president of the Unitarian Universalist Association? And the press would go, what? No, what? No. But if they said, hey, do you want an interview with the head of the yellow shirt people? The press would go, yeah, definitely. Sign me up. Because that's how we were known. We were the yellow shirt people. And then by extension, we were the love people, because it's the standing on the side of love campaigning. And the Reverend Tom Shade, in our second reading, he explores this idea of Unitarian Universalism conferring what he calls a transcendent identity on a child as a member of the love people. And his idea is that this membership would give the child a stable core to organize and orient their life around, to give them a sense of purpose and mission. And it's a membership apart from belonging to this church or that church, right? It's certainly a membership that would transfer when you bridged out of your one church and went to your other church, wherever it would be. You carry your you with you wherever you went as a part of this transcendent identity. Another way to look at that is to say, is there a compelling narrative of what it means to be you, to live as a Unitarian Universalist apart from membership in this or that church? For example, the compelling narrative of what it means to be Christian, apart from membership in any particular Christian church, is that one has been born again into a relationship with Jesus and that one has acquired eternal life. The compelling narrative of what it means to be Jewish is that one has joined God's chosen people and become a part of this 1,000-year-long story. So these narratives confer identity, and they indicate how membership and belonging set us apart. And they give members something to orient their lives around in a way of belonging to something larger than any individual church. So the question is, and it's being talked about a lot all over the place right now, is does Unitarian Universalism have, or could it have, a compelling narrative like that? A story of what it means to be Unitarian Universalist? And then, should it have a compelling narrative like that? And it's not obvious that the answer is yes. Unitarian Universalists are aware, maybe even hyper-aware, of the dangers of group identity and the way in which group identity becomes groupthink or conformity or pressure. So the idea of a compelling identity-forming narrative can raise up the suspicion a little bit. Because many of us are no doubt happily attending and supporting a UU church, and we're enjoying its benefits to our spiritual life, and we're doing good works together in the community, without necessarily wanting to acquire an identity that way, or to have an identity conferred upon us. And many parents do not necessarily want a church conferring an identity on their children, right? We sort of zealously guard our children's freedom to go out into the world and make their own identity, and to forge their own path. It's part of our proud tradition to be individualists. It's part of our religious culture to be skeptical of authority and conformity. So this can cause us sometimes to be a bit irreverent about religion, and I think there's nothing wrong with a healthy dose of irreverence in one's spiritual life. It can also cause us sometimes to hold our religious identity at arm's length a little bit, to step back a little bit from this idea of being Unitarian Universalist. In fact, all this talk about belonging and identity might even seem a little bit over-earnest to some people, right? To some people it will, and to some people it won't. But we all have different ideas and different levels of comfort with the idea of being religious, belonging to a religion, or being Unitarian Universalist. Now, as far as narratives go, I can tell you one narrative that I do hear fairly often. I hear it when I talk to people here at UUI, I read it online. It's a narrative that people tell about their experience of finding a Unitarian Universalist community. And it's a narrative of coming home. When people who didn't know that they were Unitarian Universalist find out about it and they connect to it, they say things like, I never knew this way of being religious was possible. Or I didn't know this kind of community existed. I've been looking for this my whole life. Or I'm so happy to find other people who are seekers like me and have had the same kinds of experiences that I have had. Or coming back to our ad from the 1950s, people say, I've been a Unitarian Universalist all my life and I just never knew it. And I'm so happy now to understand what that is. For many people, the sense of belonging is something different and deeper than just, I agree with our 7 principles, or I appreciate the MRE program, or I love coming to Sunday services, although who doesn't love coming to Sunday services? But that connection is a deeply felt sense of, I have found my people. I'm home. And for many people, it's precisely because we respect and we guard each other's right to our own identity and our freedom of conscience that it's a safe place to call home, that it's a safe place to belong to. And for that reason, I expect that a compelling narrative about what it means to be Unitarian Universalist never will, could, or should contain a set of beliefs that we must all adhere to. Right? We are proudly non-creedal religion, and I expect that to continue. We're a different way of being religious, so we should have a different kind of narrative if we're going to have one. As a covenantal religion, what orients us is not a set of beliefs that we share, it's a set of promises that we have made with and to one another, and it's a promise to help each other live out our 7 principles together, and to place them at the center of our lives and to consider them important. And those principles built into them safeguard our freedom to be our authentic selves. But within that freedom, they do also powerfully challenge us to walk a certain path. And our shared history and the examples of so many brave men and women in our tradition also challenge us to set out on a certain path. Okay, this sermon's been a long one, so I'm going to close with 2 thoughts today. The first is, if you've been visiting with us for a while, but are not yet a member of UUI, I invite you to consider thoughtfully if you have found your people. I can say it without a hint of bias that there is no finer group of people to be a part of. And if you feel that you are ready to become a member of this church, the folks at the membership table in the social hall would be more than happy to help guide you through that process. And then secondly, I want to close today by giving my example of what a compelling narrative of belonging to Unitarian Universalism might look like. And I'm drawing on our historic themes of reason, of humanism and optimism and love, and on the foundation of our 7 principles. So this is one way that we might explain what it means to be Unitarian Universalist to those who've never heard of it, or to our own youth growing up inside of it, what that transcendent life path looks like. So what if we said a Unitarian Universalist is someone who applies a searching intelligence to all spheres of life, to heaven and earth, who asks religious questions like, does God exist? What is freedom? What happens after we die? But also asks religious questions like, why do some have so much and so many have so little? Why are our prisons full to bursting with this kind of people but not this other kind of people? Who has written our history and who has been written out of our history? What if our narrative was that Unitarian Universalists are people who ask thoughtful questions, goofy questions, impertinent questions, dangerous questions, and we teach our children to do the same thing, to question power structures and privilege and history and nationalism and capitalism, and then we set them loose on the world. And we say, don't inherit your future, create your future, question everything. What if our narrative was that a Unitarian Universalist is someone who takes on willingly the most impossible of tasks, which is the full realization of a world built around our 7 principles. A world where the worth and dignity of all people is respected, where acceptance, tolerance, and liberality is the norm, where human relations are marked by kindness and compassion, where freedom and self-determination is every person's birthright, and peace rules among nations, and justice rules within nations, and the whole of humanity lives in harmony with this glorious earth and all of our fellow creatures. What if a Unitarian Universalist is the person, young or old, who has dedicated themselves to the realization of that impossible, ridiculous dream, and done it with good cheer, with good humor, with energy and inventiveness, and with abiding hope, because Unitarian Universalists fully believe in the power of the human mind and the strength of the human heart? And finally, what if a Unitarian Universalist is someone who believes in the power of love to transform the world? Not a love that is given to us from on high, or is waiting for us in some other heavenly plane, but a love that is in us and through us and available to us here and now in this life, as a force that is larger than any one of us and of which we are the living vessels. Love that is waiting for our hands to do its work and our voices to speak its truth. And what if a Unitarian Universalist is someone who has dedicated themselves to being that voice and those hands. This is my own narrative for Unitarian Universalism. I invite you to shape your own. This is what I see when I look at our past, however imperfect it is, and when I look at our living present, and when I look at our hoped-for future. These are the people that I am proud to call my people, and the religion to which I am proud to belong and to say, this is my home. Would you please rise in body or spirit for closing hymn number 121 in your great hymnal, Will Build Land.